we have Kansas Department of Health and Environment, the environmental portion only. That's our part. And we're going to take that up and have questions. And then the department is on the screen up there, and we'll be able to take questions. If they want to make some final comments, we'll do that first, and then we'll move into suggestions on our recommendations. So with that, we'll begin with Mr. Henning. Welcome again. And is there some you want to final statements you'd like to make about your budgets before the committee before we make a recommendation? I'd do that now.
Good morning, Senator Kirshen and committee members. This is Leo Henning, Deputy Secretary and Director of Environment, KDHE, Division of Environment. I really don't have any closing comments. I was able to complete everything on whatever day that was. Was that last Friday? I forget what day it was. But anyway, I'll stand for questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a couple of questions. One, I know, and I don't know if this question was asked for our fiscal analyst or for Mr. Henning, but there was a question about additional staff that had been hired in order to address the significant amount of testing that was needed to be done. And then how are those individuals funded? Will they stay in the budget? If so, for how long?
Do you want me to respond to that? Okay, I guess I will. There are 13 additional positions in this budget for the COVID response out at the lab for doing COVID testing. They are in this year and they are in next year's. They are federally funded through the COVID money that we've been receiving because of the emergency declaration. We will manage that head count as needed for testing requirements. Right now, we are still running over 1,000 COVID tests a day. We expect that to continue into next fiscal year. And so as the testing becomes less, we will reduce the staffing based on the need for COVID testing. Again, there's no state general funds involved with this. This is all federally funded positions, and we will manage that workload with those employees.
Okay, Senator Francisco.
Thank you. And then the other question I had was recognizing that there had been an agency request for additional lab equipment, both I think in fiscal years 21 and 22. Neither of those were included in the enhancement. If the committee is able to recommend some additional funds for equipment, is there a priority among those 2 years? Would you be looking, I mean, is the money for one machine? Is it for updating some machines? If we were able to find 200,000 this year, would that make a difference to the agency?
Yes, we have on our replacement list, I don't have it right in front of me right now, but about 12 machines that are 13, 14 years old. There's one though that is not working anymore and we can't fix it. It's just too old. And we need to replace that for radioactive testing. And so that machine itself is about a $70,000 piece of equipment. And then we have several gas chromatographs that need to be replaced because of age. So, you know, we could use the 70 or about 120,000 this year because those are immediate needs. And then next year we could definitely live with 120,000 again. So to start replacing the other equipment that we need. But the one that really stands out is the one that we use in the radio chemistry lab for radiological testing, and that's about a $70,000 piece of equipment.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm correct, you're asking for at least that 70,000 piece of equipment for this current fiscal year, 21?
I mean, that is the bare minimum. I'd prefer to get an additional 50 on top of that so I could replace some of the pesticide equipment. But you know, if I could only get one thing, that would be the one thing I need right now.
All right. Thank you very much. Anybody? Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we know why the governor denied these requests?
I believe it was just a budgeting action. I that she understands the need. I think it was just purely, it's an enhancement, and I think most enhancements just categorically were denied.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the Secretary? I had one from leftover, Mr. Henning. You mentioned in the presentation that there was some CARES money or COVID money that we did get for equipment. Did any of that, is that just for COVID-related things, or is there, what about your laboratory? Is there any benefit for that?
The COVID money could only be used on the health testing side for COVID testing. It can't be used on the environmental side to do environmental testing.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Senator Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand that because of the CARES Act money, there was an increase of 18 employees. Why are they continuing into fiscal 52? I'm sorry, 22, not 52, which they might continue into fiscal year 52, but I don't see a reduction in FTE positions for fiscal year 22. And I thought that those 18 additional employees were primarily because of the fiscal 21 CARES Act money.
They were, and we will continue those into 21 or into 22 because the testing for COVID will continue into 22. We are still doing 1,000 samples a day. We expect that to continue. And we just, you know, as long as the federal dollars continue to support those positions, we will continue to use them for the COVID testing.
Sure.
The COVID money is, some of the COVID money is related to the disaster declaration. And as long as the disaster declaration is in place, they will still remain being funded.
So are
So
all of these
positions are funded through federal COVID money. There's no state general funds involved with any of this.
So in the Division of Environment, all 459.9 FTE positions are filled?
I don't know. I would have to go look and see. We're never fully filled every moment because we have quite a bit of turnover. As I explained during my conversation, and you know, we lose about 80% of our people in the first 5 years. So we are constantly hiring and recruiting positions. So, but yes, most of those positions are full. I doubt if there's less. I'm going to say, without knowing, there's probably less than 5% unfilled.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Senator McGinn.
Was that the COVID money that they're testing the waste? Human waste? The COVID money?
Most of that money is coming from the Patterson Foundation, a private individual foundation that's providing in rural areas. But most of it is. I think there might be a little COVID money, but I'm not sure for sure. But I know that over 90% of it is a private donation from a private individual foundation.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We will turn to recommendations for 21 and 22. And we'll begin with, I have a couple that we wanted to add in as recommendations for the budget. And the first one would be for 21 and 22 both. And that would be that we're going to put off the discussion for fee increases, with the proposed fee increases would be there this time, and put it off till omnibus and take it up so that there can be some time for the negotiations to find out what those fees would actually be by that time. So, Victoria, that would be the recommendation, that we delay the discussion on till omnibus to cover those fees for 21 and 22. Any questions on the? Senator Francisco.
Thank you. I know that we had some discussion about a need to increase fees if we're lowering the budget for the agency, but is there a place that that's a direct correlation? What I'm trying to understand, what would be reviewed in omnibus?
Asking me? My understanding, it was the clean air piece and those categories. It's a general fee increase across all of them. I mean, most of those. Yes, Victoria, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what this is concerning is the air quality fees. So the air quality program is funded by fees on emissions that are put into the air, but as producers reduce those fees, the amount of money coming into the program is decreasing. So the KDHE has considered or proposed raising fees on producers, so the tonnage fee, but producers are not a fan of the idea. So what the chairman is requesting is that the KDHE has been holding stakeholder meetings with those producers to discuss the fee increase, change it, not do it. So I believe what the chairman is asking is that we receive information on how those stakeholder meetings are going at Omnibus to decide whether to insert language to prevent KDHE from raising fees. There was language last year that would prevented them from raising the fees until they held stakeholder meetings. So something similar this year.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That helps because I didn't think there was anything directly about the fees in the budget. This is just trying to understand how they're going to accomplish their work, and is the money state general funds or fee funds.
Okay. Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Victoria mentioned, so if we're reducing emissions and we're bringing in less fees to that agency, haven't we accomplished our goal by reducing those emissions? And why would we need to keep increasing fees to accomplish something that we've already accomplished?
Mr. Henning can comment if he wants, but I'll comment first if that's okay. So yes, we've decreased fees, which is obviously part of the goal, but the agency operations are still in existence. So for instance, inspectors still have to go out and inspect producers to make sure they're meeting their standards. So those salaries still have to be paid, the travel expenses, equipment for that testing still exists. So even, yes, we're decreasing fees, but there are costs to make sure that we continue decreasing and don't go back to increasing that are still there.
Any other questions on the fees? Seeing none, thank you very much. That will be, we will make a motion on those recommendations. We have a couple more that we want to add to it. And at this time, we passed out on your places there the KDHE Division of Environment budget of 21 and 22, and language in there is what we want to adopt as far as going forward, and where it says proposed solution, you want to read through that to make sure that's, and maybe I'll ask KLA representative to help explain a little bit that, come forward and what that recommendation is. Welcome to committee, Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Aaron Popelka with Kansas Livestock Association. So I think the first thing that we'd raise is when Director Henning was in here last week, he spoke that the Bureau of Field Services was going to get reduced about $132,000. And I'm not here to ask you to replace that money, just reorganize how that money's going. He mentioned that they had hired an engineer to work through a backlog of permits a few years ago. And a few years ago, what we had was every 5 years, feed yards have to renew their permits. Anytime you change the layout of a feed yard or build a new one, you have a permit. And we developed a backlog, and to solve that, it takes an engineer to review those. And so we got another one on staff to solve that. At this point, we've got some technicians that are telling me we're already starting to get backed up. And so if we eliminate engineers with this money, we'll have some issues. And so what we're asking is a directive that instead of cutting engineers, that we look at some compliance and enforcement staff. And the reason for that is, if you go to the next page, on Thursday, myself, along with some other consultants, engineers in environmental space, got an email from KDHE saying they're going to develop a bunch of new guidance on nutrient management plans and develop what's called a reportable event form. Myself and these consultants had worked with the department and advised them that the reportable event form in particular had language that was not consistent with federal law and puts our operators at danger. So these are used whenever, let's say you have a high rainfall event and you have some wastewater leave maybe a field. And I agree that that needs to be reported, but the language in there tries to say that any release is a discharge. Well, federal law says that's not true. It's only if the release hits waters of the U.S. And so that gets to our second ask, is that at least for the next budget year, that you all advise them to withhold funds on this new guidance until we can work through and get this language correct. Because while I agree we do need to report when this happens, I don't want our guys signing something that puts them in jeopardy of a fine when in fact they may not have had a finable offense. So happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, committee, any questions for Aaron? Senator Francisco.
So my question is, why would this need to be part of the budget? It seems to be a proviso that doesn't involve expenditure of monies.
So, Senator, certainly on the first page, that is definitely linked to the budget. That is, $132,000. Like I said, we're not asking you to replace that money, just redirect how that money's arranged so that we don't have that backlog again, because that puts us, if we're not getting these permits renewed, that's a problem for our operators. On the second one, I'd say, yes, it is a proviso. It's kind of it is indirectly linked to the budget because it involves staff time and energy to do some of this new guidance. And really what the guidance is doing is it's shifting some of the burden onto industry to do more reports, more paperwork. And every time you do more paperwork, you risk the technical compliance. And so I think we just asked for some time and through the budget is a way to achieve that in a proviso to work through some of this before it goes into effect.
Any other questions, committee? I had a question. Is this just for 22, both of those recommendations?
The 132,000 is for 22.
Okay.
The other one would be for 21 and 22 because they want to put that in effect immediately.
Everybody got their handout explaining what the proposed language is? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Should we ask for a response from the agency regarding these two proposals, particularly the change in the funding that they had identified not to fund an engineer?
Mr. Henning, you there?
Yes, I am here.
Did you hear the question?
Yes, I did. And I will leave this up to the committee to debate, but what they're saying is that we want the engineers to issue permits, but we do not want inspectors out inspecting the facility, so cut the inspectors, but get our permits out the door. I understand that. I think that it's too bad that we have to have this discussion. But you know, it's a matter of prioritization. What's more important, getting permits out the door or making sure that the facilities are in compliance? I'll let you debate that, but that's what the ask is from what I understand. And as far as discharges, the proviso, that is actually new to me. I did not know that this was a new form that we were asking to be filled out. Most of these facilities have what we call a NPDES permit, which allows during high rain events to discharge. That covers the producer for those exact events. I can only imagine that we're just asking to be notified in writing when those events occur, but I'm totally guessing on that part.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Comments? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am guessing you're asking for questions or comments regarding this sheet of paper we were handed. Okay. In the third bullet point, it mentions that if the reduction is used to eliminate the engineer, it would, once again, I would like to see us change the word would to could or might, because we don't know 100% that it would, and this is saying that it definitely would, once again, create a backlog. And I understand that it likely would, but I would be more comfortable with the word could or might, once again. And I realize that's a little bit of wordsmithing, but words mean things. And so I just thought I would throw that out.
Well, committee, what do you think? You want to add that, make that change to? Is that a motion? I'll second that. Okay, with it.
I guess it was a motion.
Okay, we're making a motion. It's moved and seconded that we change the word would to could before increased costs. Any other discussion? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm assuming that the only wording we'd be adopting would be the proposed solution, that the rest is just to help us understand what the situation is. So is that the case? Or would all of this information be passed on to the full committee of Ways and Means?
Aaron, you want to comment on that?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, it would only be the proposed solution. The rest is just background for your knowledge.
Senator Francisco.
I don't think we are here, we're discussing it. I think we should focus on the wording in the proposed solution as opposed to our understanding.
That's what we're doing. The proposed solution is our recommendation.
The word would is not in the proposed solution, it's in the explanation.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. After hearing the response from the agency, I think it would be very important to continue inspections, and the department has that as their requirements, or the requirements we have to keep consistent with any federal regulations. So I would not be in favor of adopting this solution.
Which page you on for sure? The 20?
I'm on, yeah, and this is all hard in the discussion, the reductions to the Bureau of Field Services. And that's the page that the motion from Senator Peck was addressing.
That'd be on the first page, 21, that were included. 22 is with 132,000.
I have two sides of one page.
I do too.
So which is the first?
Part that has the KDHE livestock facility regulatory compliance forms is the first page.
Then I was discussing the second page, well, the first page I would say is the one with the title and field services. And that's what my comment was on at this point.
Okay. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being late to the committee, so I'm a little bit confused. So this document, this paper we were given, was not written by our fiscal analyst? So who provided this to us? Okay. I thought that this was a suggestion from our fiscal analyst for the committee report, and that's not the case. So we're going to write a committee report for recommendation, potentially adopting some of this language. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator McGinn.
Thank you. How did we get to this proposal after reading page 50 and 51? I'm just trying to understand how we got here, and I'm Senator Peck. I'm 2 minutes late, so. How are we getting to this recommendation from what we received from staff and the agency?
It was just it's a recommendation to staff, I guess, to include this as our recommendation.
So who recommended? I hear KLA, but somebody here has to recommend it to bring it to us. I mean, is KLA helping us do our budget? I'm just trying to figure out whose idea was this, because I don't see it in the backup materials.
It was language that was given to me by KLA to bring to our attention on the fees and what's enclosed there. Some of it's policy stuff, but it was all an explainer. I took it as an explainer for the purpose of the budget, as a recommendation to this committee. Committee, let's just vote. If you want to include it in the recommendation, as a recommendation or not, we'll just decide that on, let's do the first page here on what we were talking about, the wood increase cost to that part of the form. Under the KDHE livestock facility regulatory compliance forms, that piece there. All those in favor of adding that to the budget explainer as a recommendation, signify by saying aye. All opposed? No. Motion fails, so we won't include that on 21. Let's move over to 22 on the recommendation there. Any questions or motions on that? Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under the recommendations here on page 51 in the budget, it says that the elimination of the funds for contractual services and elimination of 2 positions in the livestock waste management program. I was just hearing one position of what are the 2 positions they're wanting to eliminate? Are those inspector positions or are those engineer positions?
Leo, you want to answer that?
I'm doing this from memory, so if I'm not 100% right, I apologize, but I know one was an engineer and one was a technician that reviews nutrient management plans. I believe those were the 2 that we were looking at.
Repeat that,
sorry.
Leo. We didn't hear that. It's kind of muffled coming through.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you go.
From my memory, I believe we were looking at to make the $132,000 reduction. It was an engineer and a technician that reviews nutrient management plans.
Answer your question.
I think he said that would be a reduction of 1 engineer and 1 technician. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm not coming through well, but that's for my recollection, that is what the 2 positions that we identified would be.
And do you foresee that causing any kind of backlog in permitting?
It makes me very nervous that we're going to get behind on our permitting again, like we were a few years ago.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry. It's my understanding that, these budget cut requests are coming from the governor's office across the board, all agencies. And while I support, cutting spending, I think that some of these things put us in a predicament, put us in a position we don't want to be in. And I fully support the beef industry, and I know how critical it is to my district in particular. But I also don't support government overreach. So I don't want to be funding things that cause more regulation, but I also want to be compliant with existing regulations. So I'm just trying to make sure that the recommendations that we're making here to Ways and Means are beneficial to my district and to the beef industry.
No comment. Senator Alley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chair, excuse me. That was a slip. Okay.
Somebody else heard it out there.
The question that I have is, in our rest of our agencies, as we go through these budgets, we have seen a 5 to 10% shrinkage. And I'm not seeing any shrinkage in your budget for a head count.
Mr. Henning, you hear that?
Yes, I do. I can't explain that, to be honest. I know that our shrinkage is tied to funding. We've been asked for a 10% reduction across the board on all state general funds. To that end, we were told to use fee funds to make up the difference if we have them. And that was my whole discussion I had with the committee is, if you continue to cut our state general funds and you tell us to use fee funds to supplement the state general funds, we ultimately will have to increase fee funds, or we will have to reduce employee headcounts or programs. Something's got to give. So that's where my discussion when I talked to the committee last week was around, is that there has to be something. We all have priorities and we all have to make decisions about resources, but that is where we are with our budget.
On page 51, the Environmental Field Services said this is all going to cause an elimination of 2 positions. If you had to give up the shrinkage of 5%, and you have 1,600 employees, that's 80 positions. You can't find 2 positions in your shrinkage? Because I believe that not all 1,600 positions are filled at all times. Is that correct or is that incorrect?
For environment, we do not have 1,600 positions. I think that is for the entire Department of.
That's for your entire my apologies, that is for your entire Department of Health and Environment. What is your total for just the environment?
I think it's around 459, but I would have to look. Let's say
So so 5% would be 20 positions perhaps? Are all those positions filled is what I'm trying to get at?
No, not all the positions are filled 100% of the time.
So could we not find within your shrinkage 2 positions to satisfy this requirement?
It's not the positions that I'm concerned about. It's the fact that there's no money to pay them with. So by the fact that there would be less money to pay salaries and things with, we don't need the positions in some ways because we don't have the money to pay for them.
I guess I'm a little confused, but you're authorized for over 400 positions, is that correct?
Yes.
So we're not taking money away from those 400 positions, is that correct?
No, it is a general fund reduction of 10%, which is about $450,000.
Okay.
And then I think I have a slide which shows how that $450,000 is used or will be taken by the division. And 132,000 will come out of beefs. Let me pull the slide up. Okay, so we have to take a $437,000 state general fund reduction, of which 104,000 is coming out of the labs, 132,000 is coming out of beefs, 43,000 is coming out of Bureau of Water, and 156,000 is coming out of the Bureau of Environmental Remediation. It is all money tied. I don't think the FTEs were taken because the instructions from budget was use fee funds to make up the difference in state general funds.
Senator Peck, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was struggling along with Senator Alley because of the fact we're looking at Kansas Department of Health and Environment, but we are only looking at the environment section of this budget. And so I'm going to make a recommendation to try to get us moving some direction forward, backwards, what will be determined by the committee. But in the committee report, I would suggest that some type of language be put that the committee notes that there was an increase of 18 FTE positions in fiscal year 2020 due to CARES Act funding. And the committee recommends for fiscal year 22. And the reason I'm doing this is fiscal year 21 goes through June the 30th of this year. So fiscal year 22, which is what I'm putting a recommendation in here for, starts July the 1st. And I don't believe we will have nearly the testing necessity or requirements for COVID as was mentioned in fiscal year 22. So I would like to see us pull back or remove those 18.3 positions in fiscal year 2022.
So that's your recommendation to
That would be, yes, language that I would like to see this committee recommend to the full Ways and Means. And what, again, what a recommendation does, as those who've served on Ways and Means or an Appropriations Committee understand, it says the Budget Committee says that this is an area that I think that the full committee should consider or adopt this particular position. So to make it clear so we can, again, try to move forward a little bit, I'm going to make that in the form of a motion.
Okay, you heard the motion. Is there a second? Not hearing any. The motion dies for lack of second. Back on the original topic. Okay, committee, We're going to back up. We just had the motion on the positions. The topic we were talking about was the insertion of the language on fiscal year '22, whether we're going to include that or not. So let's take a vote. Not the first page, the second page, on 22 at the top. That language, it says proposed solution and with the committee there. Are we going to insert, do you want to insert that or not, is what the question is. All in favor of inserting that in a recommendation, say aye. All opposed, no? Noes have it, that will not be inserted. Does anybody else have any other recommendations to make for the committee? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would recommend that the committee ask look at an additional $120,000 for equipment, both in FY21 and FY22 at Omnibus. I think we'll have a better understanding of where we are financially right then, but at that point, but I absolutely think that if we're going to ask this department to do their job, that we need to fund the necessary equipment.
Okay, any questions on the, I assume that's a motion? I have a question. You're asking for 120 in 21 and 22? Is that
It's 120 in FY21 and an additional 120,000 in FY22.
Okay. As a recommendation from this committee.
As a recommendation to be reviewed at Omnibus.
Is there a second? Second by Senator Ware. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Oh, Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 120, you recommend 120,000 for additional testing equipment, or what do you mean when you say additional equipment?
One would be the piece of equipment that's $70,000 that's testing the uranium, because the committee is saying that they no longer can do that. And so this would be less than half of the agency's request to replace laboratory equipment. One of them, if you want the specific names, like plasma atomic emission spectrometer, is on page 49. These were the requests that were made by the agency, and the other one was for 2 total organic carbon instruments and gas chromatographs. So I would assume that we're giving permission for the agency to work through their list of equipment that needs to be replaced and replace the ones they need most.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is that under the health side of the budget, or is that under the environment side of the budget? Because it's my understanding that there were over $2 billion received in CARES relief funds, and I would assume that most of those funds were directed to KDHE on the health side and not the environment side, and we are simply making a recommendation on the environment side, correct?
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are making a recommendation on the environment side, but we learned during the hearing that it is the environment side that has the labs and provides all the testing, and that also that there's limits to what you can use CARES money for if it's not directly related to COVID or health issues. So these are testing for environmental issues.
Back on the motion to add 120,000 for 21 and 22. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no? No. Motion failed. Any other Senator Alley?
I'd like to clarify what I think I heard in that motion was we would recommend what's in the document, but ask them to consider the money in omnibus. That's what I heard in the motion. Is that correct?
I was actually asking for less than the agency had requested in their budget for both years. They had requested 295,000 one year, I think 250,000 the other year. So I was offering less than what the agency had requested and was saying that asking for that to be reviewed at omnibus.
Right, but not including that in our number, but to be asked to be reviewed at omnibus. Is that correct?
Yes. So
we're not adding any money to the request at this time. It'll be at omnibus to put that in. If they found additional money, put that in.
that was my request.
Okay, I mistook that. He was adding 120,000 for both years, so, but you're asking for omnibus to review that ask.
To review that ask so that, I'm going to be sure to get my taxes filed early. I hope I can convince all my neighbors to do that. And if you have that information, this would be a good place to spend some of that money.
You can do mine too, then. Committee, we just voted down that amendment. You want to reconsider? Senator Alley?
With that recommendation, with that explanation by Senator Francisco, I would, I will make that motion again, that we consider it at omnibus, but not put it in the total dollars requested at this time.
Okay. Senator Francisco?
I'm seconding.
Okay. Moved and second that we put it in there as a request at omnibus, but not put the dollar amount as a stated statement. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. That will be recommendation. Any other recommendations committee might have? Seeing none, we need committee approval for the recommendations for 21 and 22 that we talked about that survived. So, any questions on that? Any discussion? I need a motion to recommend the Ways and Means 21 and 22. Senator Francisco.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second by Senator Ware. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye. Oh. Hey, I'm getting, Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just make sure I've got this straight. So the governor did not recommend the enhancement request to replace that laboratory equipment at approximately $295,000. So the governor did not recommend that replacement request, but Senator Francisco's motion that passed was to have them review that request and include it as $120,000 for both years, correct?
Senator Francisco.
I was hoping it would be my motion, but it was Senator Alley's motion. My motion failed.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I don't want to increase spending that could otherwise have been covered with CARES funds. I just think that we've received so much money from the federal government, and where exactly is that money being spent, and what are we doing with it? This frustrates me to no end that we're going to recommend spending another $240,000 when we've received over $2 billion that I'm not even sure that we have a whole lot to show for it. So I don't recommend the budget exactly as it is, but understand that we need to get through the process and make a recommendation to Ways and Means so we can get to the bottom of this later. But just wanted to make it known that I'm frustrated with this process and and the spending on the larger scale. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You can write a dissenting report to put on this, and so the senator, if she feels that way, she can write that report.
Okay. All right, now we're going to vote on the recommendation for this committee. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. We have a recommendation. Any other items to bring to make a recommendation? Seeing none, we will close that on the budget hearing with the recommendations we have, and we'll move into a Senate Bill 89, had final action on that, and we'll start with the reviser, just giving us a little review of what that was about. Victoria?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, sorry about that.
Senate Bill 89
Tamara.
would Senate Bill 89 would exempt trucks, trailers, or semi-trailers when hauling agricultural forage commodities from the place of production to the market or place of storage from the requirements that those vehicles be constructed, loaded, or covered to prevent any of its load from escaping. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the reviser on Senate Bill 89? Seeing none, thank you very much, Tamara. Committee, we are ready to act on Senate Bill 89, the silage requirements. Is there a motion? Senator Fagg. They're in the minute file, that record, yeah. It was Senator Dahl's, yeah. Any other questions? Senator Dahl? Yeah.
I just wanted to move the bill,
Okay, you made a motion to,
move it out favorably.
could we put that on the consent calendar committee? Don't want it on the consent calendar? Well, motion is made to final action on Senate Bill 89 to favorably, and because it's of a simple nature, we put it to consent calendar. That's the motion. Any other discussion? Senator Francisco.
I second.
Motion been made and second. All in favor say aye. Any discussion? Senator Peck.
Okay, I want to make certain that I heard the motion is to pass it out favorably and put it on the consent calendar.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ready to vote? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The bill is passed out. Committee, we only have about 5 minutes left, and you didn't want to rush Mr. Lovelace, Secretary for Flotation, unless you want to take that up. Should we, Is this the same one? Yes, the same one as last year. Why don't we just get through as much as we can with this one? So open the hearing on Senate Bill 142 on flotation devices. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Current law specifies in statute the types of vessels of personal flotation devices that are required for children 12 and under when aboard a vessel. Senate Bill 142 instead would allow the Secretary of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism to promulgate rules and regulations to specify the types of approved personal flotation devices, and the bill would take effect upon publication in the statute book, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Tamara, very much. That was quick. Any questions for the advisor? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is most likely that tourism will be removed from wildlife parks, so how would that affect this bill if that indeed does happen? Would that need to be amended on the floor, or would that be part of the reconciliation at the end of session, or?
So there are a number of ways that could be handled. One is you could go ahead and take that out in anticipation if you wanted to. The other one is if that executive reorganization order were to go into effect, the revisor's office would prepare a trailer bill that would correct any instance in statute or in any bill that passes where that reference is now incorrect. So it would get picked up one way or the other.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Senator McGinn.
So Tamara, if we said that we would make those adjustments at omnibus, do you still have to do a trailer bill, or can we just do it in the budget?
So a trailer bill would amend literally every single statute that mentions either the department or secretary. So we would probably still have to run a trailer bill.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the advisor? Seeing none, thank you very much, Tamara, always. Proponents, we have Secretary Lovelace from the Wildlife and Parks. You'd like to make a few comments quick, please.
Thank you, Chairman Kirshen, members of the committee. I'll make my comments very brief. All we're seeking to do with this is move the approval process from the statutes into our regulations. So they would have a minimum of 3 public meetings for each change to our regulations, and so it would just change how we approve those. Currently, because of the delays that go on as we try to work through the legislative process, the current flotation that's approved by the Coast Guard is not approved by our regulations because of that disconnect. And so we would, by this regulation, we would make this change, moving this over into our regulations and allow that more nimble process to be used. So very simple approach, just to, again, change the process. The outcome will be the same, and we know your intent is the same as our commission's intent, and that is that we have the most up-to-date devices protecting our kids out there.
Okay. Thank you very much. And this is the same bill we passed out last year.
Correct.
Okay. Committee, any questions for the Secretary? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, any other proponents for Senate Bill 142? Any other proponents? At this time, does anybody want to neutral? Please come forward. Brian Sloop, there we go. Welcome to the committee.
As I had sent in my the paper that I included there, I don't have any opposition to the changes that we need to make in the life jacket side with the Coast Guard and things that way. I fully agree that we need to make those changes to be compliant. I am a little bit concerned with, again, a general shift from legislative side, the executive, to the executive side of allowing them to make the rules versus the laws being passed through this body here. So that's my only concern there is allowing them that access as opposed to staying here in the legislative side. The other piece that I'd like to add and would ask for an amendment to this is the current 1129, quote real quick, the operator of every vessel shall require every person 12 years and under to wear a United States Coast Guard approved flotation device while aboard or being towed by such a vessel. The problem with this absolute language of aboard means anytime they are on the boat, they have to wear that life jacket. And that can create a problem in a case where you've got people sleeping at night, children, things like that. As this states right here, the child has to sleep at night in a life vest. And it's been an error that's been for a long time. Being an active boater, it's always been a problem. It also goes against what federal guidance is with the Coast Guard in that federal guidance with the Coast Guard says underway. And that's really the important part of what we're trying to get there is you don't want somebody to fall overboard while the boat is moving and going away from someone. But while it's either at the dock or at anchor, which is not underway, that's overly burdensome. So I'd ask that an amendment there, as I had put down towards the bottom, simple change from aboard to underway would take care of 90% of people's concerns with that kind of thing. Adding the additional language saying underway and not in an enclosed cabin comes very close to mirroring what the Coast Guard has in their recommendations federally. Thanks.
So what amendment, what's your amendment?
I would like someone of the committee to offer an amendment to substitute the word aboard, which is already being, the sentence is already being modified as part of Parks and Wildlife's request here, to change that from aboard to underway.
Just one word?
One word would be 90% of I think would satisfy and be much more realistic to what goes on every day out there. Or you could say underway and not in an enclosed cabin. The reason that language is in there is because let's say you are on a vessel, it is motoring and they're in the lower cabin. having a life jacket in an enclosed space, and let's say the boat was to go down quickly or flip or something like that, you can actually pin somebody inside with that flotation. That flotation could sink them, suck them up to the top where they could not escape from a cabin environment. I think, that's a little bit more of a stretch, but like I said, that's what federal law currently says and allows as part of the Coast Guard stuff. I would be more than happy with just a single word change from aboard to underway.
All right, that's a lot of talk for one word.
I'm new at this.
Well, the committee, we don't have anything written down. I'd hate to have the permission of the committee to accept that as an amendment, as the committee would say we want it written out, or can we make it on the amendment? Senator Francisco.
I think it's simple enough. I'm comfortable, and we all have it in front of us in wording. But I would like the secretary to speak to this.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Mr. Secretary, you want to comment on the amendment?
Yes, thank you. We understand the benefits of this amendment. Our concern, as was the comments, is if a person's under deck. We understand that can create a hazard if they're sleeping under deck and the boat starts to sink. However, we disagree that it does meet the intent of the regulation to allow kids, even if the boat isn't underway, to be above decks without flotation devices on. We all know that's kids fall overboard every year when everybody's busy doing what they're doing and the child goes overboard and nobody knows about it. So our recommendation would be to accept that in language in part. We're glad to work out proposed language with everyone if we have a little bit of time. But we'd recommend that these be required for kids 12 and under when they are above decks, right? That would be a simple amendment to when they're down below to get rid of that hazard, but when they're above decks, whether they're eating or the boat's stopped or not, that when they're above decks, they'd be required to have that PFD on. That'd be our recommendation. Thank you.
Okay. Committee, Senator Ware.
I'd be happy to make that motion. This is about child safety, so why would we diminish child safety? To me, that's what we're talking about. Thanks.
Go ahead. We're out of time, but go ahead.
That is a semi-logical argument there, and it would help in correcting things. However, there really isn't much difference, and Parks and Wildlife recognizes from the time somebody exits the boat and into the water, they do become a swimmer and not a boater anyway. So a life jacket isn't required at that point. Also, if they were on a dock or from the shore, they would also not be in a life jacket scenario.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
I'm afraid we're going to have to close the hearing, and we'll get this cleared up on the next time, and get the exact language as we need, as both sides agree on, so we'll do it that way. Committee, we'll cut off right there, and then with that, we're adjourned.